Thank you very much, and thanks everybody for attending tonight. And I just had a problem, Larry. Oh. Okay, there. Thanks for the introduction. Let me just add that I've been a FAIRtax volunteer since 2005, and I am a strong believer in this program. That goes way back to when I had the pleasures of filing my first income tax report back when I was still a teenager. And even way back then, I had to go down the street to talk to a lawyer to get some help in doing it. And when I heard about the FAIRtax, I said, this is what I've been looking for my whole life. The IRS and just filing this, the whole tax code. But anyway, in my presentation, I'm going to use a problem solution format. And it's a great way to gain your attention. And it's also a great way to understand the problems better and to encourage you to take action. So with that introduction, let's start with a short story. Let's go back to July 4th, 1776. We declared our independence, and we declared that independence from government and from tax tyranny. And after that Declaration of Independence, we then wrote a Constitution. It was actually signed in 1778. This is the only document we have that protects us from our government. It also protects our God-given right to our production, that is income, savings, and investments. Our Constitution, as it was originally written, also protects us from direct taxation. However, in February of 1913, the 16th Amendment was passed. That enabled direct taxation, and that it was direct taxation without a limit on we the people. Government gained huge new taxing powers. They could now directly tax us without limits, and we the people lost freedom, liberty, and civil rights. The 16th Amendment enabled the first legal income tax. Then came the IRS, payroll taxes, and tax withholding. So today, you can't bring home your slab of bacon without the government having whacked off their share. It was not meant to be this way. And the 16th Amendment enables a heavy, progressive, graduated income tax. That is the second requirement for a communist state, and according to the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx. This 16th Amendment is in our Constitution. After 103 years, the tax code has become a cancer. The non-medical definition of cancer is a pernicious or deadly spreading evil. Why do I say that? What are some of the problems and issues that have come about over the years due to our present tax code and enabled by the 16th Amendment? Let's take a look at some of them. First of all, who isn't afraid of the IRS? Does that not mean tax tyranny right then and there? The tax code has grown to over 74,000 pages. We can no longer understand it. We can no longer administer it. It's too large to administer. And the IRS is used for political gains. That's a huge problem. Direct taxation and annual tax filing. The government has gained this power to tax us individually and directly. And with that, we've lost freedom, liberty, and civil rights. With the IRS, you are guilty until you prove yourself innocent, and that is done without trial, or jury. Another problem, jobs and economic stimulus. We want a vibrant economy, and we keep having these programs that don't work, that they're government spending programs and adding debt. This is a huge problem. We need a solution to this problem. Here's one. We're punishing ourselves for good behavior. Now, when you were a kid, you brought home a good report card. Your parents probably gave you a pat on the back, maybe a little bit of an allowance or whatever. But today, you bring home more income, or you try to save or invest, you get taxed for it. And along the way, our tax code is such that it rewards you to go into debt. How do you build a company or a country or a society on debt? This is very bad behavior. How would you like to have more take-home pay, more money in your pocket, more spendable income? We can do this by simply ending the withholding tax. Take a look at your pay stub the next time you get paid and look at all the tax money that is taken out. The FICA tax alone is 7.65% of your wages. And remember, your employer is paying 7.65% as well. And more than likely, you have monies taken out for your income tax on every paycheck. United we stand, divided we fall. Let's stop dividing us into classes with tax code and different tax code rates. We're one nation. I call this the stay out of jail card. We spend some $450 billion every year to comply, just to comply with our tax code. This includes, the filing and figuring out how much you own and meeting all these tax code requirements and so on. This doesn't do anything to improve our standard of living. It might have some jobs, but it doesn't do anything to improve our standard of living. This is a problem. And how about having the U.S. goods and services on the same tax playing field as imported goods? That's not the way it works right now. The U.S. goods carry a heavy tax load. Imported goods don't carry that same tax load. Let's even the playing field. And wouldn't this be a nice change? Which do you put first? The care and feeding of your family or paying the government? I think we'd like to put the care and feeding our family before paying taxes. Do you think that's a good idea? And how about showing some compassion and help for the impoverished and the lower income with the jobs creation programs that really work, and with a monthly tax refund to untax them up to the subsistence level of expenditures? A lot of our economy goes untaxed. That's called the underground economy, made up of drug dealers and prostitutes and illegal aliens, for example. This is estimated to be between $1 and $2 trillion. They should be taxed as well. Nobody likes cheaters. How can we reduce this cheating and evasion and just non-filing? This is a $600 billion problem, and it's projected to double within 5 or 6 years. And both the Republicans and the Democrats are very concerned about this problem because a growing portion of our population is just ignoring tax paying altogether. How do we solve this problem? You want to hear a dirty little secret? You like to be deceived? Businesses get the money to pay their taxes from higher prices that get passed on to their customers and It might be a distributor, and then the distributor passes it on to the retailer, and the retailer adds their business taxes. But the point is, the final consumer is paying all these business taxes, and this is substantially above the 22 cents per dollar. Well, we have a solution that can remove some 22 cents per dollar of hidden taxes from the cost of our price of our goods and services. The 47%ers think they aren't paying any taxes, but they're paying these hidden embedded taxes every time they buy something. This is just crazy. Tax inversion. Our tax code is driving out of our economy jobs, companies, and capital. And at the same time, it's discouraging jobs and companies and capital to come into our economy. How would you like to solve this problem? Now, some of it, you've heard big corporations are leaving the USA to other countries to avoid taxes. How do you think Congress is going to try to solve this problem? They're thinking more tax legislation. I'm going to show you a different solution. You know what the biggest commodity in Washington, D.C. is? It's the tax code. The politicians and the lobbyists and the special interest groups are buying and selling the tax code. That's what crony capitalism is all about. Would you like to have a solution to this problem, to reduce the power of the lobbyists and the ability of the politicians to buy and sell the tax code? We've covered a lot of choices here. I wonder if I've raised the hairs in your back at all, got you a little excited. I wonder which is your favorite problem that you would like to solve. We've talked about 15 problems here. Tell you what, let's solve all of them. If you think this solution is going to come from politicians and the lobbyists in Washington, D.C., and a flat tax certainly is not the solution, because it still needs the 16th Amendment. It needs the IRS. It has direct taxation. And most of the flat tax programs include payroll taxes, and they all include tax withholding. A direct tax is, the flat tax solution is not real, true tax reform. The solution comes from some $22 million in private funds by private citizens. They're doing research and study and focus groups, and they employed excellent economists from around the country, from MIT and Harvard and Princeton, the Cato Institute, Boston University, the Heritage Foundation. And they came up with a solution. The solution is to move the tax base from income, savings, and investments to a tax base on consumption. This solution is written in a tax reform bill. It's the FAIRtax bill. It's H.R. 25 in the House, S. 155 in the Senate, and it's one tax. It is a progressive sales consumption tax system on all new goods and services, but not on used goods. The FAIRtax plan is one tax on all new goods and services at 23 cents per dollar. That is 23% if it's included in the price, or 30% exclusive. But in any case, it is 23 cents per dollar. The FAIRtax bill is 133 pages long, double-spaced, and it replaces some 74,000 pages of tax code and regulations. You can find it on the internet. Just do a search for H.R. 25. The FAIRtax plan collects the same amount of total tax revenues as all the taxes that it eliminates. And it eliminates some beauties, starting with the federal, personal, and corporate income taxes, the gift, estate, and capital gains taxes, alternative minimum tax, Social Security and Medicare taxes, commonly known as payroll taxes, but it does not change Social Security and Medicare in any way. In fact, it puts the funding of these two programs on a larger and more stable tax base. It eliminates the self-employment taxes. And it also eliminates that 22 cents per dollar of hidden embedded taxes that we talked about. The FAIRtax plan ends tax withholding, and it adds a monthly tax refund called a Prebate, and we'll talk about this in more detail. Disposable income increases, and all the systems and processes are in place now for the FAIRtax, with the states collecting the sales tax and Social Security managing the Prebate. Let's take a closer look at the Prebate. The FAIRtax will untax legal residents up to their subsistence spending with a monthly tax rebate, which we call a Prebate, and it is received the first of the month. Most likely it would be an automatic deposit in your bank account, or it could be a check. But let's take a look at some examples of what this Prebate would be. And it's all based upon studies, annual studies that are now being done by the Department of Health and Human Services to figure the annual cost of living, or COLA, adjustment. The first example is a family of 2 adults and 2 children. Health and Human Services figures that for this year, this family unit would spend just a little over $32,000 in necessity level systems and products and services. You multiply that $32,000 by 23%, you get an annual figure of $7,369. You divide that by 12, and at the beginning of each month, this family unit would receive $614. So that $614 is to untax them up to their necessity level spending. Another example is two adults. They might be empty nesters or just starting out, but they're probably spending a little over $22,700. Their monthly refund Prebate would be $455. Let's take a single adult. They're spending just short of $12,000, and their Prebate would be $228 per month. But there's more to the Prebate than just getting money back. The important point is that it changes the sales tax from a regressive sales tax to a progressive sales tax system. So the Prebate is a progressive tax system. And to further illustrate that, let's take a look at this graph. This again is for a family, just for a family of 2 adults and 2 children. Now let's say they can get by on spending only $20,000 a year. They might live out in the country, they might grow a lot of their own food, whatever. But they're spending only in that $20,000 of spending, they are putting in only $4,600 of FAIRtax. But their Prebate is $7,369, so they're actually coming out to the good. Let's go to another 2 adult and 2 adult, 2 children family. Let's say they can afford to spend $31,000 a year. Well, that's kind of the break-even point, because as they spend this amount of money, they're putting into paying FAIRtax, this basically the same amount of money as their Prebate. So they're breaking even. Let's go to another family that has the ability or the wealth, the income to spend $45,000 on their standard of living. Well, they're now paying $10,350 in FAIRtax, which is more than the Prebate. So they now have an effective tax rate. And you see how it progresses upward, the effective tax rate. At the $500,000, if you're really into it, you got a lot of money, you like living high on the hog, you're paying in $115,000 a year. And your effective tax rate is 21.5%. But the point is, the effective tax rate is never going to get to 23% because of the prebate. And with this FAIRtax, you're no longer paying any federal hidden business taxes, the income tax, the Social Security, the Medicare, all these other taxes are all being collected now with the FAIRtax. So it is a pay-as-you-spend tax system, no annual filings. Here's another special case. Let's take a low-wage earner. They're making $8 per hour. So they work a 40-hour week. Their weekly gross sales is $320. However, they're going to have at least the payroll taxes taken out of it. They may not have any tax withholding. They may not have any income tax liability. So their weekly spendable income under our present system is just short of $300, $295.52. Under the FAIRtax, they keep their gross income. They keep all that $320. They have no payroll tax withholding or income tax withholding, and they get the prebate of $52.53. This is a weekly basis. Add that together, their payroll, their take-home spendable income has gone up to $372. That is a $77.26% increase. What a wonderful way to increase wages without a payroll increase. Just change the tax code. With the FAIRtax, there's enough, more than enough spendable income in there to pay the payroll, to pay the FAIRtax that you see at the cash register. Take a look at this two-adult and two-children family. Let's say they can spend $45,000. What happens to them? Well, you include some liability for income tax, and their spendable income under the present system goes from $45,000 gross pay down to $37,000. But with the FAIRtax, they keep their gross pay, they have no deductions, and they get the prebate. So they realize a spendable income increase of 41%, or $15,300. And again, that hidden embedded income sales tax is gone. Now, what else happens? We want jobs in the stimulus program. You eliminate the hidden business taxes. You stop taxing business. Costs go down. Prices go down. The world demand for USA goods and services go up. The USA becomes a tax-free business haven. Offshore capital of some $10 trillion will start flowing into our economy. That is a huge, huge new jobs and economic growth program just by changing the tax code. How can anybody argue against that? Now, when they did this study, they did projections out for the next 10 years. And all the major economic indicators, such as gross domestic product, employment, income, consumption, all went up. Beautiful. There's much to like about the FAIRtax. It's nonpartisan. We don't support any political party or any candidates. We look for them to support the FAIRtax bill. Right now in Congress, we have 81 that are supporting the bill, and we're looking to get more after the next election. The FAIRtax can unify us all. With that, Larry, I'd like to stop and see if there are any questions.
Okay, Paul, very good, and thank you. I am just looking at the scoreboard here, and I do not see any questions. So either you've given them so much information they have been knocked out, or they knew the answers before your presentation, Paul. And maybe we should solicit some of these folks to do presentations for us on the Understanding the FAIRtax webinar series. We're in our 8th year now of doing these presentations, and if it were not for those of you who are supporting this by being here tonight, we wouldn't still be doing them. But if there are no questions in there, or if you don't understand that you can type in a question and then click the send or submit button to get us to see that. If you overlooked that, or you didn't hear me talk about that before you signed on, that's the way you get your question addressed. And if you happen to be on with a telephone or a microphone on your computer, on your control panel on the right side of your screen, there's a flat open hand. If you'll click that hand, we will see it and know that you've got a live mic or telephone and would like to make a comment. And if we don't see anything coming up here in just a moment or two, then we will go on to the special topic.
Okay.
All right. I did have one question that was entered on the form that everybody submitted when they registered for the FAIRtax by a guy named Bill. Bill, if you're on there, I hope, regarding the compliance costs relating to businesses. He wanted to know if we have any information on what the business costs for compliance are now as opposed to what it might be under the FAIRtax, because of course under the FAIRtax it would be virtually zero. Since under the FAIRtax the only businesses that have anything to do with collecting that tax are those that sell to the end consumer. So all other businesses in the country, which are the majority of them, would be providing a product or a service that they sell to another business, and since they're making a business-to-business transaction, there is no obligation to collect the FAIRtax in that case. Anyway, the question was, what's the compliance cost for businesses today, and what would it be under the FAIRtax? I do not have an answer for that question. Paul, maybe you do. But one of the things is that it is very, very complicated to determine that. And I read a Forbes report here recently that indicated that the government is no longer collecting that data. So I guess they didn't like that it was pointing to the cost of compliance on businesses, and that it make to them and the income tax system look as bad as it really is, and so they decided not to produce that information any longer. So I don't have an answer for you, Bill. I'm sorry. All right, one more scan. You got something, Paul, to add to that?
Well, yeah, just to add to it, I mean, I'm sure it's a huge portion of that $450 billion compliance tab. And businesses spend a lot of time and effort in playing the tax code. And they also spend a lot of time and effort in lobbying, because that has a very high return on investment, a return of 10 times or more.
Yeah, that $450 million, billion dollars rather,
right, was
noted also in the Forbes report that I read, but that is for total compliance for the nation. Yeah. It did not separate business from individuals.
That's correct. But the businesses...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
The businesses have a much more complicated tax code. They're hiring, I mean, they hire a staff to do their taxes.
Sure.
And the really big corporations have IRS agents living or working on site. And the corporations have to provide them with an office and a computer and everything. And I mean, it's kind of like paying the sheriff to be in your house. I mean,
Yeah, it is. That's paying the fox to mind the kitchen, the
yeah,
chicken coop, huh? All right, I've got a
yeah.
couple of questions that have popped up here, Paul, so let's try and take these real
Okay.
quick. The first one, have you two, oh, this is personal, talked to Gary Johnson about the FAIRtax? I think it's a great unifying policy for him to push. I have talked to Gary Johnson personally. In fact, I was at the Libertarian Convention, State Convention for Florida back in May, I guess it was. And not only did I speak with him again, but had a photo op with him. Gary is an ardent and FAIRtax advocate, and he has been one since 2008 when he first ran for president as a Republican and didn't make muster through the primaries. But Gary Johnson is a FAIRtax supporter, a FAIRtax advocate, and I'm sure that he will be talking about it on his campaign speeches. The hope for us is that we can show that he's getting at least 15% of the support nationally so that he is invited to participate in the debates that will be taking place. If he's under 15%, he won't be invited, and that is a shame, because even though he may not win in the presidency, I would sure like him in the debates to bring up the topic and to make the other candidates struggle a little bit trying to justify why they don't support it. That question was asked by Dylan. Thanks very much, Dylan. I answered that, Paul, since I had a conversation with Gary recently. The next question, this is from Stephen. He's asking, have any Democrats become sponsors, or is Nancy Pelosi still blocking them? Paul?
Before, if you can go back a ways, before when the Republicans controlled the House, before the Democrats took it over, there were Republicans and Democrats joining hands and together becoming co-sponsors for the FAIRtax bill. That all ended for the Democrats when they took control of the House and the Senate. And since then, the policy is that they started the policy within their party, within the Democrat Party, that if you co-sponsor the FAIRtax bill, you lose your committee privileges. Now this is huge for a congressman to not have any committee privileges. And that policy for the Democrats has continued today. Now whether the Republicans have similar policies, I don't know, but if they do, it does not apply to the FAIRtax. So what I'm saying is today the co-sponsors for the FAIRtax bill as the sponsors are Republicans.
Yeah, there was one Democrat from Oklahoma, a congressman, and I don't recall his name, who became a co-sponsor 2 sessions ago, I guess it was. And he didn't run again for the last session. Anyway, when he was asked why, in view of the admonition from Nancy Pelosi, he decided to co-sponsor the FAIRtax, he simply stated that Mrs. Pelosi does not vote in my district. And I thought that was a very apropos comment. Anyway, unfortunately, he decided not to run again, and the new sponsor there, the new congressman there, is a Republican, I believe, and he is a co-sponsor. So, Stephen, thank you for your question. I hope we answered it adequately. The next one is from Dan. What is the major pushback from the representatives in Congress on the FAIRtax? Paul?
Well, the pushback is not I mean, they don't push back, they just don't accept it. And a lot of reasons why they don't accept it is that they recognize that they're going to lose power and they're going to lose this opportunity to gain funds to help them get reelected. And we're getting back to that whole lobbying thing again. There's one way for you to raise money to support your next campaign. Influence peddling is what it's called, crony capitalism. And a lot of politicians, they are not in favor of that. They like it the way it is. That the status quo. We're learning it's not just the politicians. Some corporations like it this way. They like to own politicians. They like to have control of that. It gives them a leg up on the small business person. You know, I mean, a smaller business, the best they can do is join some kind of association and hope that association can get some favors out of Washington for their business. And this is the game that's going on. So there's a lot of establishment, not just politicians, don't like this. They like it. They're cozy with the present system.
Very good. Okay, Paul, thanks. One more question here, and then we'll go on to the special topic. And this is from Dial-In again. Do you think it takes a presidential candidate to support it to get it passed? Paul?
Well, that would certainly help. Now, we don't expect, we as volunteers don't expect the FAIRtax bill to get passed without presidential support. And because they're going to have to sign the bill. I mean, if they sit there and say they're going to veto it, then certainly Congress isn't going to push it through. But we need the bully pulpit. We need somebody in the bully pulpit to lead the agenda. And that's not going to, the FAIRtax bill, I think, is not going to make it until it has strong presidential support. I like to ask people, I like to challenge them. This is your profiles and courage moment, particularly if you're a politician. This is your profiles and courage moment to do the right thing for our country, for your family, for your children, for the next generation. And the FAIRtax would make the USA the true world leader in the free economy, the true free world leader. Because most of the economies of the world have a similar tax code that is based on income, savings, and investment, on consumption. Some of them have both sales tax and production taxes. We don't want that. We want to, this is a repeal and replacement program. This is a big, big deal, and we want you to get behind it.
Yeah, it's going to take a president to advocate for the FAIRtax with Congress, and that's both the House and the Senate. And until we get that, we're not going to make much headway. We've got these elections coming up, and one of the things that we're going to ask you to do, at least I'm going to ask you to do now and consider doing, is that start writing to the Trump campaign promoting the FAIRtax. Why aren't you promoting the FAIRtax? What's with this monkey business of a multi-tiered income tax? Can't we get rid of the? We can get rid of the income tax system, and we want you to be the leader that will help us do that. And keep calling them every week. You can call their local office one week and call their Washington office the next week, or email them. It doesn't matter, but they count these. They tally these. They don't look at your name, to be honest with you, unless they happen to see it by accident and you're somebody who's familiar to them. But it's going to take a lot of pressure on our part. And the same for House Speaker Ryan. He needs to be booted in the assets to get off his income tax plan, which he's coming out with. Anyway, thanks, Dylan, for your question. We're going to go back now and address the special topic, which is the fallacy of the mortgage interest deduction. So, Paul, take it away.
Okay. Yeah, this is interesting. The mortgage interest deduction is our special topic, and I'm using a study done by Dr. Welby. She has a PhD in economics, and she is a director of research for Americans for Fair Taxation, our national organization. But let's take a look, first of all, at it's tax deductions, just kind of get our minds around it a little bit. If you total up the top 10 deductions, that total amount comes to some $852.3 billion. So right away that points out a question of, well, the tax tables are one thing, but what is the effective tax rate? And let's remember that all these deductions and loopholes and special deals become more valuable as your wealth and your income increase. Now, number 5 in this chart that you're looking at is the mortgage interest deduction at $77 billion. So let's take a little closer look at this. What is the percentage of households that own their own home? Well, in the U.S., it's 65% of us own our own home. That's obviously a little help from the bank or the mortgage company or whoever. Remember when the housing bubble burst, it was up to about 68%. But it's fallen back down to a more historic average of around 65%. Canada, interestingly, has a 68% of their households own a home. Singapore, 87%. New Zealand, 67%. The United Kingdom, 68%. You might be wondering, what does that parentheses mean? Well, that parentheses means that these countries do not have a mortgage interest deduction. But lo and behold, their percentage of households that own their home is higher. And even more interesting, the United Kingdom phased out their mortgage interest deduction between 1975 and 2000, and the home ownership rose from 53% to 68%. So maybe this mortgage deduction isn't what it's cracked up to be. A little more detail. Of that $77 billion, most of it's going, 64% of it is going to households that earned $100,000 or more. Remember what I said earlier, deductions and loopholes become more valuable as your wealth and income go up. And we're seeing it right here. On the other hand, 65% of us taxpayers claim an income of $50,000 or less. And of this group, only 10% of them use the mortgage interest deduction. So who's it helping here? In reality, the mortgage interest deduction does little to expand ownership, as we've seen from the tables, the data. And it goes on, it encourages debt, and it discourages paying off the mortgage. Hey, I pay off my mortgage, I don't get this deduction anymore. What kind of logic is going on here? And it's, Karen sums it up in the last 2 sentences of her research. It says, a better way to promote home ownership is to quit tinkering with the tax code for social engineering purposes and enact the FAIRtax. The economy would boom. I hope that this presentation has enlightened you, has stimulated you, has gotten you motivated, and you're ready to do more. Now, since you're attending this webinar, perhaps you've already joined FAIRtax. If you have not, the first step is to go to FAIRtax.org and join the FAIRtax cause, the real true tax reform cause. It's very easy to do. You just put in your name and your email address and your zip code, and you'll start receiving the FAIRtax Friday newsletter to keep you up to date as to what's happening with the IRS scandals and misbehavings, and how we're doing in Washington, D.C. with what little lobbying efforts that we're able to get done, and and what various congressmen and co-sponsors think of the bill and what various volunteers are doing. It's a great weekly newspaper. After you become a FAIRtax supporter, the next step is to join the 1040 Club. Now, the 1040 Club is one way for you to contribute, at least $10.40 a month. You can contribute more if you want. You can do it on a one-time basis. But this club is to eliminate the 1040 form, eliminate the IRS to get the FAIRtax enacted. And again, you just go to fairtax.org/1040 or look for a contribute button any place. Now, when you go to the FAIRtax, there's a button you can click on to get involved. And you can sign and send the FAIRtax letter, it's like a petition, to your U.S. representative and 2 senators, encouraging them to support and pass the FAIRtax bill. And also, it's very important to call your U.S. representative and 2 senators, and do it every month, and asking them to co-sponsor the bill if they are not, and if they are, to thank them, encourage them to do more in the way of supporting the bill. Between elections, at election time, unless you've moved to Florida from New York or you live in Chicago, you only get 1 vote. That's a joke. It's not a joke, it's a reality, actually. But anyway, but the point is, between elections, when you call a U.S. representative or a senator, they multiply your voice by 10, because they know that there are 9 others out there that think like you do. They just haven't made that final step of letting their voice be heard. So I encourage you to take this action. If you want to have some really good entertainment and learn more about the FAIRtax, listen to FAIRtax Power Radio. And you can just do a search of FAIRtax Power Radio on the internet, or you can go to Spreaker, iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube as well to listen to FAIRtax Power Radio. There are 2 FAIRtax volunteers that just have a great time talking about the FAIRtax and what it would do for our country. And there's one episode in there where they talk about Thomas Jefferson coming back to see how his experiment is going with this new republic. And he starts out by learning that the men are now flying. You can imagine where it goes from there. And are you familiar with a website called Popbox? Popbox is a great website to learn all about the bills that are in Congress. You know, what the bill is, who co-sponsors it, what is the status, and you can vote, show your support or disapproval of every bill, and you can write in a comment about it as well. So I encourage you to go to Popbox and show your support for H.R. 25 and S-155. And a new book has just come out. It's titled America's Big Solution, and this is part of our this book helps kick off our campaign for America's Big Solution. And that America's Big Solution is the FAIRtax. You can buy it online in the ebook form. It probably will cost you $3, $2.99. I just bought 10 of them from Amazon, the hard copies, and with shipping and no special deals or anything, I paid $11.29 per book. But it's a primer, if you will, explaining the FAIRtax and how it works, and it's full of illustrations as well. It's a great, great book to inform yourself and to inform your relatives and neighbors and anybody else that might have some interest in real, true tax reform. With that, Larry, that completes my presentation, and let's see if we have any more questions. Larry?
I'm sorry, I had myself muted, and I guess you should hear me now. There are no more questions posted at the moment, and I was reviewing a chart here that reflects the net average lifetime tax rates under the fair tax versus the income tax, and everybody's lifetime tax liability under the fair tax goes down substantially. And to give you just a quick sample here, if you're only making $20,000 a year, your lifetime tax obligation under the fair tax would be 2.4% versus 7.1% under the income tax. If you're earning $50,000, your average rate under the fair tax is 11.3% versus 17.6% under the income tax. And one more here, over $100,000 or $100,000 or a little bit more, you're at 15.2% under the fair tax versus 23.2% under the income tax. Now, some people have asked if the fair tax is revenue neutral, how can we be paying less taxes? And the reason we are is because of the additional people that are going to be paying into the system. For example, the fair tax is the only tax plan that will totally tax the underground economy. Any of the income taxes will have the same issue that we have today. So I don't care, even if it's a flat tax, if the people are not going to submit their 1040 forms and declare their income, they're not going to pay tax on it. So that won't change one bit. And that's one big reason why an income tax is very, very undesirable for us. So we have to express that to our representatives and to President potential Donald Trump. So those are a couple of interesting things we have. And I've got a question here that just popped up. We'll see if I can find that. Well, okay, Pam, I lost your question. I'm sorry. But if you would either post that again, let me see if I can find it here again. Why didn't that come up when I clicked on your... Okay, Pam, I'm sorry. When I clicked on the on your name, the question disappeared. So if you can type that in again, I'd appreciate that. Or if you happen to be able to turn your microphone on, I'll pick you up and unmute you. Nothing burns me up more than when I do something goofy that screws up the show. All right, anything else up there? No, and we'll just hang on a second. Otherwise, folks, we appreciate your participation tonight. You've asked a couple of good questions, and we wish we had more. Let's see, Pam did it again. Let me see. There she goes. Okay, we got you, Pam. Thank you so much. You're a doll. Okay, she said, I had someone tell me that they owned 7-Elevens and they did not pay taxes to those that they purchased their products from. Can you explain that? I would guess, Pam, that that person is talking about Florida sales tax, and there is no national sales tax yet, so of course they're not paying any tax there. But they are paying the embedded taxes that everybody is burdened with, and they are paying their income taxes at the end of the year, quarterly, maybe quarterly in their case. I would imagine at least quarterly. So I think you need to ask them, are you not thinking about the Florida sales tax, because there is no national sales tax yet? And then are you paying quarterly estimates to the IRS? If they can answer those questions to the affirmative, then you've got a platform with which to take that discussion a little bit further. I hope that answers your question, Pam. Thank you so much. That's a good one. And here's another one that just popped up.
Well, Larry, just let's stop for a minute.
Pardon me?
That person must be paying payroll taxes
Sure,
Social Security and Medicare.
well, they should be, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and unless they're running a nonprofit, if they're not making any profit, they may not have any income tax. But
Okay. Pamela added to her question statement. She says it was embedded taxes that they were referring to. Is that embedded into the cost, and does that come across as a tax? No, it does not come across as a tax, Pam, but it is embedded in the cost. It is hidden. That's why nobody knows it's there. And if you think about it, now he's the 7-Eleven owner. He's selling at retail. So he doesn't have the view of the tax structure of the merchandise going through the supply chain before it gets to him, okay? But every business along the way has got to recover the taxes that they're paying, the compliance costs that they're paying, plus their normal overhead and things of that nature for doing business. And those are all embedded. There's some taxes in there, there's a compliance cost, it's a mixture of expenses that they have that they add to the cost of their product. And that cost gets passed through the supply chain. We use the term embedded taxes generically, but it includes things other than taxes, and he is paying them, he just does not know it. And his cost is anything from 20 to 25% more than the actual cost of the product he is purchasing. He has to be made aware of that. And I can't think of a document or bulletin offhand that you might be able to go to, but if you go onto the website, Pam, FAIRtax.org, go into the research paper. Oh, I tell you what, go to the FAQ, frequently asked questions, and see if there might not be that question might not be there and what the answer is, and it may also direct you to a research paper that explains that in more detail. Actually, that's what I think the special topic next month is going to be what are the embedded taxes and how do they get passed through the supply chain. So put that in your notebook there, Pam, and maybe you can come back next week and we'll get a clearer answer on that. But thanks for sticking with us.
Just let me
go ahead.
Something in here. The USA has the highest business taxes in the world. And the only way those business taxes get paid is just those taxes to a business is just another expense. And the only way they get the money to pay those is by raising their prices. You might think big oil. Tax big oil. Tax them to death. Just tax them. Well, you're going to pay more at the pump. The more you tax big oil, the more you're going to pay at the pump. That's the way it works. There's nothing the governments can do about that. They would love to, until they get into price controls. That's the only way they can do that, is with price controls.
And we don't want to do that because that's not free enterprise.
No.
That's not America.
Price controls. Jimmy Carter had price controls for us, and some of us remember how terribly that worked. Yeah,
under President Nixon. And he froze wages also.
Yeah, it's the free market. A free market, the unintended consequences of a free market is higher quality and lower prices.
Yeah, that's why with there being no tax and no tax reporting under the fair tax for businesses, unless they're selling at the retail, which this 7-Eleven guy would be doing, all of those other businesses, the 80% of the other businesses in the country, have no tax liabilities whatsoever except for any state tax issues that they may have. But as far as their federal costs go, they go away. And they don't even have to file a federal tax return again, so it takes a big burden off of business. And with that burden gone, and with competition from the consumer, the cost is going to come down as it goes through the supply chain. So the cost that gets to the final retailer, in this case the 7-Eleven guy, is going to be down anywhere from 12 to 15 or 18%. and then they will add the fair tax to that. So the fair tax will in fact cause a slight increase in retail prices across the board. However, the average worker is in the 15% tax bracket, and they are going to realize a 29% minimum, 29% increase in take-home pay. So if prices go up 12, 18%, that doesn't bother them at all because they're getting 29% more income. The smallest increase will be seen by those in the 10% bracket. They see a 21, almost 22% increase in take-home pay. So they're still better off than they were under an income tax. And there's no more payroll, there's no more deductions from their paycheck. They take home, everybody does, takes home their whole paycheck. All right, Pam says, how can I explain that to them? I think I kind of answered that, Pam. You'll have to do some research on it on your own. And oh, thank you, Pam. You're very kind. She says, you guys are amazing. Thanks so much for your dedication to this great cause. And Paul, I know you appreciate those kind of thoughts and comments also. Anything you'd like to add before we shut it down, Paul?
I just again want to thank everybody for attending, and please keep spreading the word. We are in the educational, informative phase of FAIRtax. Women's suffrage took 40 years to get passed. The first 30, nothing happened. Word spreads a lot quicker today. The internet, we have websites, and if you're into Twitter and Facebook and all that, get involved and spread the word. Thank you.
Sure enough, and don't forget to contact the Donald Trump campaign and keep promoting the FAIRtax to him. Unless something really goes haywire, unless he shoots himself, he will be the next president, because the opponent is really that's really a hard case. I won't say anything more than that. Thank you very much, everybody. I wish you have a good night, and we look forward to seeing you here next month.